I am Tural Aliyev, urban planner from the University of Geneva. I have the great pleasure to be with you and moderating this panel discussion today from the city of Geneva and Switzerland, which is one of the global hubs of international governance, as well as multiple programs on smart and sustainable cities that have been launched by international organizations within the UN system, as well as private sector. The group I'm working with had the opportunity to work with Azerbaijan in the past within two main frameworks among many others. One is CASPISNet, the network of scientists from the Caspian littoral countries working and conducting research on elements of environmental and climate change, as well as the project on mountainous research initiative of the Caucasus region. As you already know, this workshop on smart and resilient cities and infrastructures is jointly organized session by the University of Geneva and the Azerbaijan State Economic University. This workshop is taking place within the framework of CERT International Postgraduate Conference on Economics and Management, entitled Nizami Ganjavi and Sustainable Development, which is taking place in the second largest city of Azerbaijan, the city of Ganja. Regarding the topic, as we know, in the context of reconstruction and redevelopment of the Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, the President of Azerbaijan Republic announced that smart city and smart village concept will be at the core of the development projects. This means that smart city and smart village concept will drive the territorial development of the region for the next decades. Within this framework, the workshop aims to explore the challenges and promises of the smart and resilient concept, to analyze the difficulties while taking startup projects off the ground, and to localize it within the political, economic, and social environmental context of Azerbaijan. In this capacity, I would like to introduce to you our guest panelists. And please be informed that there has been a slight change in the format of the panel discussion, as Dr. Alexander Hejazi had a last-minute professional important implication that prevented him to be with us. His point of view on the new context and debates on smart cities and sustainability will be reflected in the discussion by Dr. Tarantino. So our guest panelists are Dr. Matteo Tarantino, who is assistant professor working extensively on data and governance from the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart from Milan, Italy, and he's also senior lecturer at the University of Geneva. The second panelist is Mr. Elshad Hajiyev, who is the CEO at Sparrow Analytics and on a smart city initiative in Geneva, Switzerland. And the last panelist is Dr. Anar Valiyev, Professor Valiyev from ADA University. So the first presentation will be provided by Dr. Tarantino. And my questions are within the context of contextualizing the smart and resilient cities to global new trends. Could you, Dr. Tarantino, share your ideas on what are the challenges and promises for cities to be smart and sustainable? What are the new tools and new approaches for cities to be more agile, efficient, and welcoming? And what can we learn from the ongoing experimentations on the ground across the planet? The floor is yours, Dr. Tarantino, you have a presentation for 15 minutes. So please.
Thank you, Mr. Aliyev, and thank you all for inviting me and having me in this very, very interesting event. So what I'm going to do today will be share with you what I call 3 keys about the future of smart and sustainable cities, which are, to me, three areas in which we need to focus and direct a little bit of our attention to learn, especially from past experiences, and especially experiences in the past in building or retrofitting smart cities and smart villages that didn't quite work out in the way that we intended them to. So by way of introduction, I want to stress how the concept of smart city, smart and sustainable city, is not one in which there is a great deal of agreement among the various parties. But I think two good definitions are provided by smart and sustainable smart cities from UNEC, the Economic Commission for Europe, who says that a smart sustainable city is an innovative city that uses ICTs and other means to improve quality of life, efficiency of urban operation and services, and competitiveness, while ensuring that it meets the need of present and future generations with respect to economic, social, environmental, as well as cultural aspects. And to me, this is one of the most comprehensive definitions of what we intend as smart and sustainable city should be and must be in the future. Now, contrast it with a very short definition, which is then expanded, but the core definition provided by the European Commission as a smart city is a place where traditional networks and services are made more efficient with the use of digital and telecommunication technologies for the benefit of its inhabitants and business. Now, my entire presentation will be about how can we move towards smart and sustainable cities that use technologies, and we'll talk a little bit about technologies later on, and what technologies and what counts as technologies, to improve the quality of life of inhabitants while retaining a certain degree of economic and political sustainability. So cities must not go bankrupt, and competitiveness, so fostering a thriving economic environment. And what I particularly like about the first definition is that it stresses how these cities must not be built for today. They must be built for tomorrow. So taking into account also the needs of the future generations in economic, social, environmental, and cultural aspects. Now, this is a very broad topic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the soul-searching moment in which we are now, which was certainly accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemics, but was roots start a little bit earlier than that, actually a few years earlier than that. So we are presently running into a sort of stop, not stop, a slowdown in the smart city as we intended them before, market and industry. And it's epitomized by two episodes. In 2020, 2021, Google stopped one of its largest smart cities projects, the Quayside project in Toronto, which was a redevelopment of an area of Toronto along the river. So they just stopped it, canceled it. It's not going forward. And this was one of Google's most prominent projects. And the second is that Cisco canceled its Kinetic for Cities line of products. So this comprehensive suite of products that was supposed to deliver the whole promise of smart cities for the customers. And why are we running into this? Because whenever you start a smart city project, now we have about more than 20 years of reflection on this. And you run essentially 5 kinds of risks. Your city risks to be disintegrated. So you have a lot of technology, but the technology doesn't speak well. So the various systems do not interoperate very well. Your city can be simply unloved. And that was the problem of Toronto. So citizens just dislike what you're doing, in particular with respect to some components. For example, data collection. They may not know very well what you're doing, but they build up some ideas, and then public opinion weighs against what you're trying to do. So they don't come to live there, for example. The third is your city runs the risk of becoming unmanageable because you deploy a lot of technology and systems, but then your administrators do not have the capacity to make the best use of it. So they actually end up hindering their performance in some instances. So it works worse than it was before you deployed all this technology. One of the things that threw the majority of the unsuccessful smart cities project into this array is that they become too expensive because you didn't account for some costs at the beginning, and you have downstream costs that put excessive strain and load on your city budget. So some systems cannot be maintained, they start to malfunction, and then the entire city starts to malfunction. And then the last risk is the risk of becoming obsolete, is obsolescence. So what happens in this case is that the vendors that sold you the technology, so the sensor, the database systems, the analytics, which was proprietary, and they run out of business or that product is discontinued for whatever reason, and then your maintenance now becomes impossible and you do not have the resources to upgrade or to change to another system. So these risks usually come together, like because when it rains, it pours, how they say in English. So when you start to have problems start to roll into one another. So how do we try to secure our projects against this kind of risk? How do we build cities where people actually want to live? Well, I'm going to start from one focus that is usually not central in this reflection, and we really need to bring it at the center of this, because when we build smart cities, we build smart and sustainable cities with technology at the center, and then nature is something like a very nice side product. So if we can, we are going to add parks. That's fine, but it's seldom at the center of the reflection. And I want to stress that some of the most successful experiments, particularly in retrofitting cities, have instead pivoted on advanced technology in the form of nature and smart uses of nature. What you see here are two examples from Milan. One is very, very well known at this point. It's called the vertical wood, the vertical forest, and you see it here. And the other one is less known, and it's called the green corridor. And it's this green reforestation attempt that will make use of some of railway space that is now unused in the center of the city. Because nature-based solutions, so using nature in a way that is smart, provides city with cost-effective and long-term benefits for a lot of the stakeholders. Not only the city, it doesn't just look nice. It doesn't just provide citizens with some good socialization spaces. It really provides benefits also in climate terms, in hedging against some natural hazards. It gives the city a new cultural facelift and provides with new selling points to reattract people in the city. And so biodiversity that is often at the periphery of smart cities projects that foster in a technocentric approach on let's deploy technology to make administration easier, and then everything else will sort of follow. Need to bring nature more closely at the center if they want to be able to deliver in the long run. The second focus is instead quite technology centered, and it's a focus on interoperability, and I'm sure that the presentation after mine will build on this as well. But the point is this: if you want to hedge against the risk of obsolescence, one of the ways is to make whatever systems you deploy fully interoperable. So the data coming from the parking system must be accessible to the heating system, must be accessible to the system of delivering power, and so on and so forth. Why is this? Because integrated systems, so systems that exchange data, are more resilient, number one, are more useful because you can have analytics that come from integrated data, which are more accurate and often more useful than single system integration, single system analytics. And they're easier to finance because it's easier to attract co-funding for this kind of system. So this means that as you build your city, you need to design APIs, so interfaces through which systems can exchange data from the get-go and not consider them, again, like nature, to be a side project. We are going to build a nice, smart parking system, and then if we can, we are going to make it interoperable. No, interoperability needs to be at the center. And how you do that? Well, you open your data to the highest amount of stakeholder possible, because then they become engaged in that. They provide resilience to your system, and it's easier to involve them and engage them also when you need to fund for upgrades. So one thing that is often not spoken in this kind of project is that if you need to trade off between short-term performance and long-term integration, I suggest to prioritize integration, because in the long term, as you build for tomorrow, is a better investment. Third, benchmarking and monitoring. So as you build your smart city, again, the next presentation is going to refer to this as well, of which I'm very happy. To adopt a benchmarking system, so to monitor the performances of your smart city should not be, again, a side thought, like a secondary thought. It should be front and center. And why is that? There are a number of very good frameworks with easy to use KPIs. For example, ITU and UNEC developed a United for Sustainable Smart Cities framework with useful, easy to deploy KPIs to monitor your city. And if you use that, so you monitor your city's performances in the same way many other cities in the world are doing, you get three benefits. Number one, it drives your system to maintain operativity and efficiency, because you are reporting also outward, so to the world. So you and the people operating those systems feel that they have a higher responsibility, because now it's your country that is being looked from abroad. Second, it drives investment in building capacity, because you instantly understand where lack of capacity in administration is, and you can use all the expertise accumulated in these international organizations and networks and bring it in your city administration to build capacity, because you are now speaking the same language of this international organization and of all these other cities in the world. And third, it encourages smart upgrading, meaning that as you continuously compare yourself with other cities on the same baselines, it means that you can start see quite early when your systems are a little out of fashion or out of date, because you continuously see and are involved in comparing with other cities, which means that you don't allow your systems to go obsolete, but rather through continuous comparison, you upgrade smart. So you upgrade using the experience of other cities and exchanging it. So by way of conclusions, we are still transitioning from the very early 2000s idea of technocentric smart cities, where the focus is only on technology, to what we like to call people-centric smart and sustainable cities. So building places where people actually want to live, because many experiments in the past have become ghost towns, or those in China, Lavasa in India. There are several examples of smart cities where people eventually did not want to live. And so they either left or did not come. We want to build cities or retrofit cities where people actually want to live. And my final point is that if we want to do that, we cannot do it in isolation. We need to be inside international networks of cities, because the problems we are facing, other cities have faced in the past. So there are a great number of networks of organizations where we can learn from other cities' experiences and then localize it, which is another topic that the third presentation today will pick up on, localize it in the best possible way. Instead of building what in Italian we call cathedrals in the desert. So beautiful, shiny cities that, however, in 10, 15 years become ghost towns because we didn't build them with people at the center. Thank you very much. That will be all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tarantino, for your interesting and enriching presentation. What we have learned from your presentation is that biodiversity preservation is important, not only for aesthetics, but also for long-term return. And we have to move and also think how to build new cities from technocentric approach to people-centric approach, and nature should be included in the program of the smart region and smart city in order to avoid to have in the future the ghost towns. So here it's important to highlight the well-being of the population, quality of life of the citizens among smartness of the city. Another point that we can highlight here is the integration is very important point, system integration, and making the system and the city more resilient, useful, and easier to co-finance. And here we also can say that among smartness, we should also include sustainability. So we should maybe think more on smart and sustainable city or region, which is relevant to Karabakh region, rather than speaking on smartness, only smartness. KPI are also important, as you mentioned, Dr. Tarantino, for monitoring, maintaining, and making more efficient the city and the region. And this is the main points that we can highlight. Before that we will move, and thank you again, Dr. Tarantino, for your presentation. Before that we will move to Dr. Elshad Hajiyev, I would like to address myself to the audience and asking them to share their comments, questions on chat, and we will then address them to relevant panelists. So, Mr. Elshad Hajiyev, now is the floor is yours, and you will share with us practice-informed new strategies. It's also important to see how from global promises, global trends, promises and challenges generally, and contextualizing it within the global context, smart and sustainable city. It's important also to see how smart and sustainable projects can be elaborated off the ground. What are the challenges for that? And you will share us your insights on Urban Sparrow project in Geneva. And the questions here are how startups can produce smart solutions for cities. Could you specify the political, economic, technical challenges and difficulties for startups independently of its context, either it's in Geneva or elsewhere? And how to implement and how to take startup projects off the ground. And finally, what is the field practice and how to avoid the pitfalls? So the floor is yours, Mr. Hajiyev, 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes presentation. So please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aliyev, and thanks for very valuable contributions, Mr. Tarantino. I would like to take from there. My name is Elshad Hajiyev. I'm the CEO of Sparrow Analytics SA. We're a small startup in Geneva, and we are our main business is to collect and analyze the data. Here I'm going to share some information about what we do, and then we're going to talk about how the startups can help the smart cities, and what are the challenges, how we can help them, how the government actually can take proper actions to help these startups for such beautiful projects. So we are at the moment in Geneva, and we are in collaboration with Geneva Air and Noise Pollution Agency, which is called SABRA. And our mission is basically, first of all, to have the data analysis. This is one of the biggest problems in the smart cities. And we are aiming to help the smart city in terms of establishing most comprehensive measurement ecosystem. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. We also help the private sectors for optimizing their operations, evaluation of their assets, and compliance. At the fourth point, we help the green fleet join the responsible drivers to contribute to the community. And the fifth, which is one of the most important things, is that we are aiming to form consortiums to share the knowledge, know-how between academic and R&D partners to contribute new data models and technologies. So by speaking about the problem, so what is the problem, and what we're trying to solve is that insufficient sporadic measurement of the city environment and inconsistent data. By urbanization, right now, we're estimated that 60% of the people live in cities. So a lot of people come together, and this is very difficult to manage. A lot of different problems come up, like air pollution, noise pollution, mobility management, security, healthcare system, buildings, and utility, you name it. I mean, there are a lot of different challenges to solve. Now, there are some effects of these problems, like social effects, traffic congestions, population which is living under the acceptable air quality, which is basically determined by the World Health Organization. And a lot of, like 7 million people die every year from health issues caused by air pollution globally. This is a very important issue. And on the other hand, economic effects like healthcare expenditure. I mean, a lot of air pollution causes a lot of health problem, and the healthcare expenditure of the government is increasing. Mobile network optimization, inconsistent real estate evaluation, which is the problem for the social as well. High insurance premiums and utility management costs. So, of course, there are a lot of commitments to solve the problem, but in general, the problem is that insufficient data measurements. When you do not have enough information, you cannot really make a proper diagnosis. As a result, there is a lot of uniform, disorganized and fragmented small data, impossible to analyze with artificial intelligence, and most of the urban eco initiatives are unproven. So for the solution, what we use actually is use the existing transport infrastructure, and we place the micro sensors, low-cost micro sensors on the cars, bus, and trams. And then we implement standard technologies, standardization technologies, and we collect the data, both spatial and the temporal, which is like place and the time at the same time, measure many parameters as possible, and then we actually create big data, which is possible to analyze by AI and to come up with the proper diagnosis. It works in a sense of a network. A lot of sensors equipped with the cars, on the cars, and the calibration, automatic calibration with the state approved reference grade stations, which is very important, that because of the data has to be relevant in collection. And then we collect all the data and put it in the data nest. This is what we call. And we process this data with machine learning, and we provide the interface of software, API, and application cloud, which Mr. Tarantino has spoke about in terms of integration to current infrastructure. So the case use has basically a lot of benefits. Currently, the city measurement is done by fixed stations, which is globally done everywhere. As you can see in Geneva, there is one fixed station, which is effective only 50 meters radius. But if we see the Sparrow full coverage, you can see the map where we determine repeated abnormal measurements, and we can go deeply inside and understand what's really happening there, why these are there is pollution. Maybe it's congestion of the traffic, maybe it's limitation of the speed in the city, and that there might be a lot of problems that can be solved very, very easily if you know what is the source. So up to now, there is no proper turnkey solution. That's why we provide this solution to the smart cities in order to implement easily, without development cost, without huge know-how and experience that is needed to implement for the cities, with a flexible choice of sensors, scalable and very cost-effective. Now, we have spoken about what we do as a startup to help the cities to become a smart city, but we are not the only one. There are a lot of different startups. Now we are going to talk about what are the challenges, how the government can help them, how the platform of generally for the startup can be improved so that there are more smart solutions coming up to the scene. So basically today, it's very usual that there are a lot of startups come up with the very bold and smart solutions. They are basically offering something which is not heard of, or the big corporations are not willing to go deep, because first of all, they are thinking out of the box. Startups formed by next generation, generally brilliant people. These guys are coming up with different type of solutions. They are non-hierarchic, agile and very fluid, which is a big problem for big corporations. And now the technology is very accessible. Today, high-end technologies such as microchip production, powerful servers, 3D printing are much cheaper. So the small companies, enterprises can actually implement new technologies, new processes. So these are the challenges. Those are very important for startups to become successful, especially on the smart city. There are political, economical, and technological challenges. Political challenges are mainly, from my experience, we have been challenged on two major challenges, because what you are trying to provide is not demanded by the requirement, the legal requirements, and there is a polemics between, do we need it? Is it, yes, it's innovative, it's good, but it's not required by law. Do we have to do it or not? So the startups have to well explain the benefits in that innovation, how they can help. So the smart cities, as Mr. Tarantino stated, it's the cities of tomorrow. We're not trying to solve the problems right now or requirements, but we're trying to go further, go ahead and see the future and try to help people to improve their lives. So the second major political problem is the long decision-making process. In government, there are a lot of different hierarchies. Decision-making process is very long, time-consuming, and you have to find basically the right person who's going to take a decision and go for take the proper steps. Second challenge is economical, because for the startups, existing paying clients is very important, and here we are talking about the paying client as a government. The government has generally predetermined budgets for next year, and if you go and ask for money to be spent on the special project, they're going to tell you that the budget is already done and spent, or so on. And the access to the government grant is pretty difficult, and it takes a huge amount of efforts and time to be accepted. And the last one, technological, is the high-tech labs are generally in academic organizations or the government labs. The government has to help the startups to have the access to these labs. Incubators, government can actually support these incubators to help small startups, and academic support is very important, especially in Switzerland. There is Inno-Swiss organization which is helping small startups through academic support, which is very helpful. That helps us a lot. How to implement and take off. Basically, from the startup, well-designed business model is very important. Developing minimum viable product, running proof of concept, joint mentors and advisors, and pitching to investment. It's basically it's evident things, everybody knows that, but how the government can actually contribute to these steps is very important, because educating people, making education programs is very important, and the government can actually help small startups on that. Opening access to government and university labs, as we spoke before on the previous chart, is very, very useful, that we used a lot in Switzerland. Assist on the field test in the city. The city administration have to help the startups on the logistics, on the process in order to make the field test. Establishing new finance for existing incubators. This is also having a great role in Switzerland, specifically in Geneva. We have seen that. And support government grants and programs. It's also like a turning point for success for these startups. Now, in practice, guidance for startups, we can say field practice that we have experience is the focus on the problem solving. There is some problem, you provide some kind of a solution, and it's welcomed. Build a team with the experienced people in the field, find experienced mentors and advisors, make sure POC is working. This is very important. Of course, without POC, nobody is going to take action. It's a time-consuming thing. Finding proper channels to decision makers, as I discussed, it's also very, very important. Pitfalls to avoid is that you have to make your budget and timing planning very well. We used to say multiply by 2. Budget and time is very crucial point. Private investors look at the paying clients. If you don't have the paying clients, you will probably struggle to get investors. That's why you go to the grants and they ask for government to help. And sending cycle to government is very long. Be prepared. This is going to take a very long time to sell your solution to the government. So integration is very important here. We, as Mr. Tarantino spoke about, state systems is very important to have the seamless integration with existing government systems with your new technology. Third-party systems have to be also supporting the same format. And the standardization is very important in terms of avoiding wasting valuable data. The data have to come with the standard. So, as a conclusion, before the 15 minutes is over, startups are very important contributors to smart city and similar government projects because they're fluid, they're fast, they are thinking out of the box, and they can provide some very smart solutions. Government has many opportunities to speed up and optimize transition to smart cities. That's a fact. Government has these opportunities. They have to take proper actions in order to do that. And without government support, promising startups will struggle to succeed. They need help. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Aliyev, I give the grant to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hajiyev, for your comprehensive presentation on a startup project related to smart city. And what we have learned from your presentation is you have also mentioned about insufficient measurements, which bring us to what Dr. Tarantino said about KPIs, which is important to monitor, to have the data collection in order to make more efficient and to see where we have the difficulties to improve. And you have also said you have also talked about the integration of the infrastructure and how startups are important for being as a main contributor to smart cities, and how government can play a role in encouragement of the smart startups projects in the region. What you call is optimizing and speed up the projects. And you have also talked about the education programs and other tools for encouraging and optimizing the startup projects. So I think that this is also one of the ways that we should focus on Karabakh region to bring startup projects along the smart city project of the government and local authorities, and the private sector should have a big role on this on the development of and reconstruction of the Karabakh region. And another point is you have mentioned about the Swiss Tech as institutional organization who are helping for startup projects. I'm wondering if within the context of Karabakh, should we have the same kind of, or create the same kind of organization which should be in line with smart city initiative of the government and help optimize and financially and help assist the startup projects and educate them to know better for field practice within the context of Azerbaijan and how to avoid the pitfalls. This is very, very important, I think, as well. Before I will move to Dr. Anar Valiyev's presentation, I'm asking again the audience if you have the questions and comments related to the presentation of Dr. Tarantino and Mr. Elshad Hajiyev. Please don't hesitate to ask your question in chat. That we can address to the panelists. Now we move to the last panelist of the panel discussion, and this is Dr. Anar Valiyev, who is the Dean at the ADA University of Azerbaijan. He's also a professor and lecturing on urban affairs, public affairs, and working also in governance within the context of Azerbaijan. So our first presentation was about the global trends, what is lacking in the concept of smart city, how is important to bring back the nature in the program of the smart city, and speak more about smart and sustainable development of the region. We saw how, in second presentation, we saw how startups are important as a main contributor to smart city concept, and how it's important to bring them back also to the region to have comprehensive development on smart and sustainable development of the region. Now, in our third presentation, we will try to understand localize smart and sustainable and resilient urban development in Azerbaijan. What does it mean? How, and the main questions here, Dr. Valiyev, are how you read and understand smart in the context of Azerbaijan, how to adapt general vision and global aspirations for smart and sustainable cities to the given context of Azerbaijan, and what metrics and policy domain the authorities should take into account while translating the smart city visions into policy within the context of Karabakh. So the floor is yours, Dr. Valiyev, up to 15 minutes presentation. So please.
Okay, thank you very much, Tural. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, perfect.
So I will just try to be short in order to give more time for the discussion. So my topic on would be more about practical issues, how to implement this smart, sustainable, and resilient application of urban development in Azerbaijan, what kind of the challenges we experience in Azerbaijan related to this kind of the topics, and what could be done in future. Well, before just going forward, we have to understand that there were no much debates about the sustainability resiliency, especially of urban development in Azerbaijan. It only just began recently when Azerbaijan signed up on the Sustainable Development Goals. And one of the development goals was from the perspective of the cities and urban development. That's a moment when we began thinking about more about sustainable development of specifically about the cities. So I wanted to start with a statement of the Jane Jacobs from the perspective that cities usually have a capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they're created by everybody. So what does it mean? That we have to understand, not only us, I mean, as academicians, but also the governmental officials, that whenever we create or whenever we want to implement smart city concepts or smart city application, the center of the smartness should be the people, not technology, not a certain type of the policy, but the people. How to make the life of the people to be easy, to be comfortable, to be stress-free. So if we put this smartness concept into our understanding of the in Azerbaijani context, we have to understand that for the last 30 years, Azerbaijan population grew up exponentially. So right now we are talking about almost above 50% of population to live in urban. Well, officially it's a 51, 52%, but unofficially it could be even more than 60% because we don't count the urbanized areas or the people who are actually living in rural areas, but most of the time they're working in urban areas. So it's not only about living places, but where they earn their lives, salaries or so on. So we can speak more from perspective of the more urbanized people. Specifically Baku, if we consider Baku as a major city, I mean, officially we have between 2.2 to 2.3 million population, but unofficially, the population of Baku can reach up to the 4 million population because of the surrounding so-called metropolitan area. We don't have this concept of metropolitan area, but from the metropolitan area, there's up to the 4 million can live in area and just come to Baku to work on that. So saying that, there's a lot of problems arising from the perspective of the having so much population in urban areas. It's definitely it's economic problem dealing with how can provide the labor or employment for the labor force, or growing labor force. The median age of Azerbaijanis are 25 years old, and they require this certain type of employment. Environmental problems. Recently, the Caspian sea level rise up, especially in the south of Azerbaijan, in the Neftchala city, led that the incursion of the Caspian Sea into the Kura River, leading to salinization of the river and just a losing of the water supplies for the certain type of the river. So environmental problems. And another thing is waste management and so on. And definitely social and policy problems in the urban areas, bringing a lot of problems, including the transportation issues, including the tourism and so on. And all of this needs certain type of the approach in Azerbaijan to have certain type of the sustainable development or creation kind of the resilient cities. Well, worth to mention that Azerbaijan so far does not have a national urban strategy or national urban plan to understand of how the urban development should just continue. Yeah, we began the master plan process for all the city recently for the last 5-6 years, and now the master plan of Baku is going on. Hopefully it will be adopted within a year. But so far on the governmental level, we do not have a national urban plan or national urban strategy envisioning the framework of how the cities or how the urban development should go overall in the country. And that's why whenever the concept of the smart city came to Azerbaijan, or people began to talk about that, specifically President Aliyev mentioned about the smart city concept and smart village concept in the occupied territories, that caught the public and especially academic circles and policymakers unguarded, because not many people were using this kind of the concept or using the applications of the smart cities in Azerbaijani realities. So if we try to understand the challenges of Azerbaijan, we can simply say that it's what kind of the problems, if we again read and understand smart in the context of Azerbaijan. There was a recent report from the World Bank. I mean, it was actually before pandemic, so maybe pandemic changed the situation in a much more positive way. So we can simply say that approximately in Azerbaijan in 2018, only 15% of population used internet to interact with authority, and 7% used for education or learning activities. So the pandemic definitely changed it, but let's see what will happen after the end of the pandemic. Maybe the numbers will be much more higher, or it will go to normality. I don't know how much it will change. In 2017, only 1 in 20 people, only 5% bought the products from online, while in average, it was 24% in the world. So we are much behind the world understanding. Azerbaijan ranks around 68th place in the 144 countries on B2C e-commerce index, because very low penetrations of e-payments will be, and again, because of the pandemic, it grew up, and let's see what's going to happen. And because of the high transaction fees associated with the credit cards, the banking system is not operating properly, and the crisis of 2016, and then later on, closure of the banks in 2020 affected the problems with the financial system. So what to do? What should Azerbaijan do? What is the case of Azerbaijan from this perspective? Well, the strategic roadmap of Azerbaijan that Azerbaijan accepted in 2016 focused on several measures to improve agricultural productivity, because Azerbaijan thought more about the diversification of economy, and the diversification of economy was coming mostly from the agriculture. It was not looked at from the urban areas as the drivers of economy, but mostly agriculture. And that's Azerbaijani government was keen on the development of e-agriculture, including using big and open data, for example, smart agriculture perspective, incubating agri-tech startups, and so on. So looking from that perspective, what we can say that today that unfortunately Azerbaijani government or Azerbaijani policymaker do not have so far coordinated conceptual framework. What do we mean under the understanding of the smart city? How the smartness is understood? So it could be some kind of anecdotal evidence when I was discussing the people especially with the people when I was talking about the smart villages and smart cities, the people who were usually work in agriculture, they simply believe that there will be robots working in the agricultural sector instead of them, while they will not have jobs. So it took us some time to explain that it's not necessarily robotization of the agriculture, but making the smartness and using the smart technology to make your life easier. And as was previously mentioned, that in Azerbaijan, unfortunately, what is the problem is that they could be understanding that we need solutions for that, but there's no common umbrella under which this common platform can work. So if we look, for example, to Singapore, there's a certain type of the common platform called Smart Singapore, where all the services, electronic services, whether it's e-governance, whether it's urban transportation, whether it's tourism, whether it's a visa, everything under the Smart Singapore platform, using this kind of platform for interactions and so on. In Azerbaijan, unfortunately, what we have right now is that we have an e-governance platform that operating comparatively efficiently and effectively. So we can say that this is a part of the system that is working, but e-governance is not necessarily smart city. So e-governance is not so, because many people in Azerbaijan understand that e-governance or electronic services is a technically smart city or smart concept. It is one small part, but it's not necessarily it is what it is, because we have e-governance for the last 10 years, but the e-governance remains mostly the same. It doesn't change all the time. So I usually getting the passport the same way I was getting 10 years ago, although it could have changed. So, for example, World Bank, for example, when they made some kind of a study, understanding of the smart village or smart city concept or so on, they discussed a lot about applicability of this kind of the concept. And mostly what they were talking about that what we need is a certain type of the indexes, so-called smart village readiness or smart city readiness, and other indexes, especially the indexes of e-governance system penetration, the indexes of how the system should work, and in understanding of how the problems can be solved. So we have to understand from perspective that smart or intellectual approach to the life in the city of urban transportation was conducted by Azerbaijan almost 6 or 7 years ago. But this so-called intellectual transport in Baku, this kind of policy or this kind of initiative failed. It failed, and that's why it became discredited in the eyes of many people, because whenever the people saw the certain type of the smartness or intellectual, it was even called intellectual transport, they immediately say that, okay, this is another way of dealing, but it's actually didn't help us to solve the problem. So what is the kind of the conclusion in understanding of what is problem for Azerbaijan, especially in implementation smart city or smart village or smart region? That's you, Tural, rightly mentioned that for Karabakh, maybe we don't need a smart village or smart city, but we need a bigger picture from perspective of this smart region, because how many cities going to be over there or where they're going to be located, we still don't know. So what we need actually is right now is a conceptual framework. What do we mean by that? What kind of the initiatives could be, what it is? Because everybody in every ministry or every policymaker understands smartness differently. They understand smartness completely from their own side. So for example, if we talk today to the people from the private company, let's say telecommunication companies, they immediately think about this. Okay, where should we put our cables? Tell us where we should put our towers for the 5G or 4G. But without understanding why we need this 4G or 5G, why we need this cable, what's for, then nothing going to happen. So the conceptual framework, it must be in place. The second thing, e-governance must work perfectly. So e-governance from perspective is that the business and the governance should be made as much as possible easy. So it doesn't make any sense if I need to submit 20 documents, even if it's online, while I can just submit only one document for certain type of activities. So it should be easiness in the public administration or so on. So reforms at every level of the governance must be conducted. So if we're talking about the smart city or smart village, we have to talk about the self-governance. So we have to talk about the independent municipality level. We have to talk about independent municipality decision-making, municipalities, administrative, political, economic freedom for this municipality. So the decision-making was coming up from these communities. And smart city will actually, or smart city concept should actually benefit this community. And finally, the understanding should be that smart city is not solution. It's a method for solving certain type of the problem. So if today in Azerbaijan, the perception that once the smart city is going to be there, the traffic will be solved, everything will be solved and will become kind of the competitive economy. No, that's not solution, that's just a method. Thank you very much. That was mostly my points. I expecting any questions, whatever it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Valiyev, for your valuable insights and your interesting reading and understanding how we should localize the concept of smart cities within the context of Azerbaijan. And as you rightly mentioned, resilience is important today in the development projects of Azerbaijan, which is a bit lacking in the development framework of cities. And as you have also rightly mentioned, that the national urban strategy plan is lacking also, and smart indicators, the smart city indicators should also reinforce the resilience of the territories and the city, because when you have the vulnerable territories and cities, the smart indicators and smartness will not efficiently work. So here I bring what we can highlight is the smart indicators. I mean, we should understand the smart city and its indicators for pushing and having, not only making the easier the life of citizens and digitalizing the way of their living, but also we should also think how smart city indicators can make better the well-being of the population, how make the prosper of the citizens, how it can help to avoid the national catastrophes, disasters, how can smart city indicators help the cities to adapt and mitigate climate change and environmental change phenomena. This is all should be within the same packet, and I'm coming back to what you said, Dr. Valiyev. The conceptual framework is important because, as Dr. Tarantino said, that we should not think for making the cities of today, but for the future. So the main question here: which kind of cities and territories we would like to have in future, in the long term, and what we can conclude here that whatever the concept we have is smart, resilient cities or sustainable cities, this all concepts should be at the core, at the heart. The people first should be at the core of all the concepts. So the main issue is how we can make put the people at the core of this concept. And it seems to be that the authorities in Azerbaijan sees the Karabakh region as the prototype and the experimentation area for making the future of their territory and to implement their vision for the future. So then I find extremely important the topic of today, because this is the time to contribute to this conceptual framework of smart city and smart sustainable vision, because other 80% of Azerbaijan will be in line of 20% of Karabakh as they are seeing in the future. And the last point also on what you have mentioned, Dr. Aliyev, the education is very important. And as you mentioned, with the agriculture sector, how the people sees smart city. So this is more important to say that smart city indicator should be putting the people first and make easier the life of the citizens, and also to promote the quality of life and the well-being of the population. So here I open the Q&A session for the audience, and we are getting the questions and remarks from the audience, and we have several questions here, and let me read the question. So the first question is, we have a lot of thanks by audience for interesting and useful presentations. So there are two questions to all panelists. What do you think about short, middle, and long-term strategies and operations must be useful for innovation strategies of Azerbaijan, or innovation development, startups, smart cities, how to attract citizens to attend this operation? So and second question, if it follows the first one, is there a common policy to regulate the management of smart cities? So I would like to start with Dr. Tarantino, especially on how to attract the citizen to attend these operations. And can you elaborate on that and giving the example what happens in Western cities?
Thank you. Thank you also for the audience for the excellent questions. Those are very, very, very deep questions, and we could take an entire day discussing only the surface of them. But I'm going to be provocative in my reply, and I'm sure Elshad and Anar can build on that. So the number one thing, because I think the question refers not only to cities, how to attract people to cities and avoid the smart cities, but in general, how to engage people in this kind of smart transitions, which is something that Professor Valiyev spent quite a bit of time on, and the difficulties of that. And to me, the key, not the key, but one important component of this is that the benefit for the people need to be clear, for the people that you want to involve. The second thing, so the benefits are often quite fuzzy because they are projected in the future, and the people you want to engage today, while you're building for tomorrow, but you need them today, are not clear about how you're spending their money. And why smart transportation being an excellent example that has been, so many cities wasted a lot of money in projects that didn't go anywhere in smart cities. So they have pilot buses going around for 10 years now. And it didn't go anywhere. And the citizens are like, we wasted so much money in this. Why didn't this go into a school? So the problem here is that you need, to me, okay, so this is my opinion, you really need to strongly separate the future projection of what this city will be, and be very clear with the people about what the cost benefit will be now if you want to engage them. The second point is something that Elshad very rightfully so stressed in his presentation, and it's that if you don't attract capital, you're dead. If you do not attract capital, you cannot have a startup ecology if you're not able to attract investors. Otherwise, you have this, we try to do that in Italy many times. So we try to build the Italian Silicon Valley here and there in Italy, and it always failed because as soon as you run out of public money, and you tend to do, then everything dies, right? So you need to be able to attract, and Azerbaijan, I think, is very well positioned because the country has a sizable amount of technical expertise and a long scientific tradition that goes back decades in terms of producing capable technical knowledge, very good engineers, very good specialists, and that's one point. So you need to have good talent, and you need to retain talent on the ground. That's the other problem. So if your best engineers live for Moscow, for Beijing, or for the US, then you have brain drain, and again, it's difficult to build a startup ecology if you do not retain the people. So that's a matter of fiscal incentives so that you can pay them competitive salaries. Otherwise, you don't get top tier component. So this is about, in general, how to facilitate the engagement of people into innovation thing. You need the benefit. So what's in need for them must be, number one, enticing. So good money, good improvements, and I can show it to you right now, because you can fool people once. Twice, the trust capital is gone, and the people will not believe you once you try to do it the second time around. So you need to be very upfront and clear about how much this is going to cost, what's in it for them in the short and in the long run. You need to attract capital, which means that you need to have talent, and you need to pay talent competitive salaries. Once you got that, then the innovation ecology can really take off. I'll stop here because I'm sure that my colleagues also have a lot to contribute on this first question. Maybe we can go back to the second one about the common policy after we do a first round.
Sure. So thank you, Dr. Tarantino. I would like to address now the second question to Dr. Hajiyev on if you would like to react to one of these questions, you are more than welcome. So it's more how to attract citizens to attend this operation. So how can you how can you promote the interest among the people on your smart city project, or what can be the tools for attract them and people, also the authorities and others, in generally the society on your smart startup project?
Well, that's one of the major issues when you're trying to implement startup, the smart city policy into the government, or specifically any city. because first of all, Mr. Tarantino has touched very important point, drainage of brain. Secondly, he also mentioned about the knowledge of the society, of the people. Those are actually, do we need this? Why it's done? I mean, of course, when you try new technology, there are going to be failures. I mean, you cannot guarantee something new to work 100%. There must be failures, and you have to, at least at some point, encourage these failures for the people to try new things. So there are two aspects, or maybe I would say even three. First of all is the commitment and the encouragement of people to start projects like that as a startup. Secondly is the community which is helping together, understanding what is the smart city and why these startups has to succeed, and share the knowledge, share the support, field tests, and so on that we have spoken about. And the third part is the knowledge of the population. I mean, the knowledge, because at the end of the day, all we are talking about needs a budget. I mean, money is one of the biggest, I would say, the oxygen supply for startups, for smart cities, for innovation. I mean, we're talking about everything for the future needs money now. So this money comes generally from government budget, which means the taxes that the people are paying. So they have to know what they are paying for. I mean, if we are encouraging people to start some kind of a new project which is going to increase their life quality, they have to know about this. I mean, first of all, I think at the short term, the government has to open some kind of a platform of transparent information exchange, so that the current situation is this. If we do this project, it will increase it, expected to increase it like 20% or 30%, whatever. That's why we think that we have to give a try and work on some specific project. And if the government is supporting this project, of course, there are going to be, I mean, the citizens will be willing to say, yes, I mean, we are okay to spend such percentage of our taxes on these projects, because we need better life quality, better mobility, less traffic, clean air, and you name it. I mean, I'm living in the city and I want it to be better. So is there something that we can do? Yes, we can. And who's going to do it? Okay, startups or smart people, or small companies. And then there must be some kind of a system of supplying this grants or the financial support to these companies, so that these smart people do not leave their country and go to another country or go to Silicon Valley to work for salary. I mean, I had a discussion the other day with the CEO of the Lotvizade incubation office, and we spoke about why there are not many startups, many, let's say, commitments in Azerbaijan, because there are a lot of people are like following the illusion that there are better life in other countries like Silicon Valley. They pay more salaries. No, it's illusion. I mean, there are pros and cons. If there is a support for innovation, support for startup, these people are not going to leave the country. There must be kind of a, let's say, the ecosystem where these people can bring up their ideas. The ideas can be converted to proof of concept. Then it can be implemented into smart city, and this smart city gives a feedback to the people, to the population, that now our life is becoming better.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hajiyev, and I would like also address this especially the first part of the question on short, middle, and long-term strategies and operations, which useful for innovation strategy of Azerbaijan or innovation development startups and smart cities, to Dr. Valiyev. And if you would like to comment on other sectors, so please.
Well, I would just try to combine both questions into one place from perspective that, again, you may have a short-term, middle-term, and long-term strategies. We even just wrote a lot of strategies, roadmaps, and everything, especially for innovation or something like that. But we have to understand there should be certain preconditions in order to have certain type of the environment or ecology where this startups or where the innovative people will stay and will not leave and will survive, not survive, but will flourish over here. And these conditions are, unfortunately, is not there yet, because the main conditions over here are usually three conditions. First is a competition, is to have competitive economy where everybody is equal in the market, no monopolism, nothing. The second one is the legal framework, meaning independent courts. And the third is a certain type of the condition that the government can create for having better taxation system, attractive investment opportunities, and so on. So if you have all the three conditions, everything else can be, I don't say everything else can be forgotten, but this is the three preconditions for the innovations and the strategy and innovations and the so-called smart city concept population to be over here. If you do not have this one, the people will not come. If you do not have, people will migrate. This is going to be biggest kind of the challenge for Azerbaijan. And again, we can discuss a lot of things about smart cities. We can discuss a lot of things about innovations, but we have to understand that smart city is not purpose. It's not it's not a destiny for us. It's just a tool. It's just a method. It can be there. We lived without smart city for many years, and we lived, I don't say perfectly, but okay. So even if for the next 10, 20 years, we also can live without that. But we have to understand why we need it. We need it in order to make the life easier. We need to make a life, this complex life, pretty much kind of the stress-free environment. So if we understand it, that's going to happen over there, just in short. But I agree with all my colleagues who told me to discuss before. So pretty much I'm on the same page with them.
Thank you very much. Another question from the public is, what do you think about social and open innovation approach in development this sphere? How to attract the people to attend in solution of their problems? So we see that the people are interested here within the context of Azerbaijan, that how to attract the people. I mean, it seems to be that people are staying behind of these strategies of which is initiated by the government. So how can you react, comment on this question? So yeah, Dr. Tarantino first. Yeah,
thank you, Mr. Aliyev. I will comment on the open innovation approach more strictly, and it's as I mentioned in my presentation. I believe that in the case of cities, opening as much as possible your data to the maximum number of stakeholders has a lot of benefit in terms of essentially creating value from your data, which then feeds back into the upgrading of the infrastructure. So on that behalf, the more open you are, the better it is. But if you ask me about open innovation models in general, so open source software, open engineering, and so on and so forth, I must say that it's heavily culture dependent and context dependent. So it depends on where you are, essentially. I cannot comment on Azerbaijan because I don't know enough about the country to, I know that in some, I know very well the Chinese case, for example, and I know that it took China 15 years to get an open source, open innovation scene up and running. And it had to struggle against very strong cultural problems in there. For example, it just didn't fit very well and they invested an immense amount of money to make it work. And in the end, China ended up essentially building a Chinese open source scene, very large, but to some extent not fully connected with the overall open innovation movement in the world. So it's context dependent. It's very easy to be over enthusiastic about open innovation, but it's being conceived and designed and deployed in very specific cultural contexts. So what works in the United States West Coast, works in Switzerland to some extent, works in the UK, does not necessarily work everywhere else. So also open innovation, I believe, needs to be contextualized and localized to some extent. China is a good example of a way of doing that. We cannot get into the details here, but I think just bringing in the US conceived open innovation, open source movement does not necessarily work everywhere you deploy it. And actually, for example, if your salaries are not particularly good for the software industries, it's difficult to convince people to devote extra time to contribute to open source projects, to name one, and so on and so forth. So it needs to be carefully implemented, and it's not a cure-all solution, in my opinion. I'm sure Elshad has a hands-on experience on this better than mine.
Thank you, Dr. Tarantino. Yeah, please, Mr. Hajiyev.
Yeah, well, Dr. Tarantino, I fully agree with you. Open source is a matter of culture, and this can be done by the people. Those are socially committed for delivering to the society something valuable other than financial. Because you must have reached certain point of satisfaction financially, or in the context of your success. At that point, you discover that I can share what I have with other people, so that they can go on. And it can take pretty long time in order to develop that platform where people had enough work or side business, or they have enough income in terms of salary, and they think about sharing their assets. Because at the point where you have spent a lot of time and struggled to earn some assets and knowledge, you would like to monetize that without sharing in an open platform. However, there are many things that is not possible to monetize immediately, but would be beneficial for the society. In order to do that, I think on starting from academical organizations and down to social publicity, I think it should be, there must be some kind of initiative from the government side in order to encourage people to share their knowledge, ideas, and to on the platform where other people can match their experience and the opportunities to create something useful for the society, and in an open source, in an open platform manner. So this should have some kind of course, feedback in terms of marketing those people, and of course they're going to have a benefit on the long term. But I fully agree with Mr. Tarantino that it's a long process. It's possible after succeeding some steps of incubators, some legal framework, for example, as Mr. Valiyev has mentioned, where startups have improved and they have become prosperous at some point, and then after the open source comes only at that point, in my opinion.
Yes, Dr. Valiyev, if you would like to react on the question?
I pretty much agree with all what was said. Again, I will repeat myself that for having this kind of things, you need a certain type of the preconditions for the in the society, in the country, for these people to participate or to attract the people to attend the solution of the problem. And beyond of that, I would say that inclusive decision making, it's another solution for the smart cities to operate. For example, if you every day facing certain type of the challenges, let's say by crossing the road, if the smart city cannot solve the problem for you, even if you are complaining or something like that, then the smart city does not work. The smart city should work in order to make your life easier. If you cross the road and you see that there's a problem, you're waiting too much or something like that, you have to have a place where to complain and change the situation in real time. Otherwise, without inclusiveness of the participation of the citizens of the city, nothing can work. Thanks.
Can I add to that, Mr. Aliyev?
Sure, yeah. But we have 5 minutes to conclude the session. Go ahead.
The last comment thank you. The last comment from Professor Valiyev was very, very important. Citizens are the best sensors in the sense of able to capture what is happening in the city. So, and one of the good things, or the many good things that Sparrow has been doing in Geneva is that it piggybacks on citizens, so private forms of transportation. Because one of the illusions is that you can carpet the city with sensors. And then one thing we didn't talk about today is that the more sensors you deploy in the city, the higher the risk of malfunction, the higher the risk of cyber attacks. And it doesn't go up linearly, it goes up exponentially. So there are ways, it's much cheaper and to some extent better working to ask your citizens about some things that may not be working well in the city. But it needs to be done in a way that is smooth, that is simple, and we did a lot of research on this. The deal breaker is that the citizens need to perceive that whenever they report a problem, it gets solved, so that whatever they are reporting it has an impact in there. I'm telling you this because there have been numerous experiments that we have been tracking about giving citizens apps so that they can go around in the city and take pictures of whatever doesn't work. And in most countries, these experiments failed because citizens took pictures for the first week and then waited 2-3 weeks and then nothing happened. And then they were like, this is useless, and dropped it. And once you lose that trust capital, you can design the best app anyone has ever done in the future, but people are just not going to use it. So you need to, it's not just a matter of building avenues for participation, so giving people spaces to speak in whatever way. It doesn't mean that they need to write a post or write a letter. It can be a picture inside an app, but then something must happen. So the citizens must feel that whatever they invested in building that data point is valuable. Even getting a reply such as, sorry, we don't have the money to do this now, we'll do this in 6 months, in 12 months. But then a commitment, because otherwise the citizens will feel that participation is just a mask, something like a facade, and then we'll drop it. And there is just only so much trust capital in citizens that you can waste. After that, they just don't follow you anymore in these projects. And that's the scenario that you want to avoid the most. And I'll shut up because I speak too much.
Thank you, Dr. Tarantino, Mr. Hajiyev, and Dr. Valiyev. And now we are coming to our conclusion remarks. So I believe that was a helpful and educative information for the audience in Azerbaijan. And we have learned from this session, what are the global trends, what we should take into account, and what we have to pay attention while conceptualizing and redeveloping within the context of Azerbaijan. We saw how smart cities, startup projects, as a main contributors of smart city, can play a huge role on advancing and promoting the concept of smart city. We saw also how it's important to put in the program of biodiversity aspects, the nature, on the smartness of the cities, and resilience is one of the main points as well. And we saw also how it's important that smart city indicators should also contribute to quality of life, well-being of the population, to build the future of the cities. So here is also important to mention about the inclusive decisions and educative programs. For education, as I noticed, was the part of each panelist. It's important to educate the public society on what we are doing and to bring and to integrate the society and the population on the smart city projects. And here also we have to pay attention to that the public and the society feels on what we are doing, initiating, and they are an integral part of these changes. So here I would like to conclude the session. I thank personally to all the panelists for your time, your energy and motivation that you were being with us here. And I believe and I'm sure that our panel discussion was very useful and enriching for the public in Azerbaijan. And as an outcome of this session, we would like to elaborate a policy memo that will be directed to local stakeholders and national authorities, and which can potentially be the part of conceptual framework for the development of Karabakh region. And I also thank the audience for the questions and our translator. So thank you very much again. And the conference has other workshops, so you are more than welcome to be part of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, and thank you, Mr. Aliyev, for the excellent moderation, and thanks to the organizer and my co-panelists. It's been a great pleasure and honor.
Thank you.